Okay, so utopian socialism, like that. This isn't an argument for utopian socialism. Holy shit, he broke that. Or anything, but I wrote down a few things while watching a video. And the sources, because I'm not an idiot though. On Russian Marxist history and how it evolved from certain traditions and stuff. Also because I want to clarify what I meant back then or on utopian socialism as a whole. I'm not saying that it was like I need to define utopian socialism. That's the issue. I wrote some things here that I could read, but there's more notes than anything else. Utopian socialism is non-Marxist socialism. It can work by Marx's own definition. He said that systems aren't like just made in a rigid line. It's not like something has to happen. Capitalism, feudalism, communism, socialism, none of the stuff generally have to happen. And you can see that with history. And that's why social democratic criticism of Marx is never really good, because they forget the fact he never said that these things had to happen. He didn't say revolution had to happen. He didn't say that corporatism wouldn't happen. He acknowledges that systems could have came out of different places and not all systems would rely solely on capitalism. He wasn't Eurocentric. He was Eurocentric, but he wasn't claiming that Eurocentrism was the system for everything. So communism is not like presupposed to happen. It's not like the end goal of society. It's not anything. It's just the liberating way of society. It's like the best choice. Lenin as a utopian project, utopian socialism such, was a non-Marxist, fundamentally non-Marxist. He claimed to be Marxist, but fundamentally non-Marxist socialist project, which in turn didn't really actually practice socialism in the Marxist form. It was more in the utopian socialist form. And it was described as right-wing socialism at the time. That's why you have like left communists, aka normal communists, being everywhere at the time. Left communists and orthodox communists, it was just like the natural stage. Then there was right-wing communism, Leninism. And at the time, this utopian project was made because of a misunderstanding on how it was supposed to work. There was the Oriental despot that Russia came out of, which led to West's capitalism. Lenin had the system of Prussian and American capitalism, and where Prussian capitalism was like anti-revolutionary. The capitalists there wouldn't rebel against the feudalists, but like merge with them in a way, through reform. While American capitalism was like the revolution, where bourgeois would take over instead. The problem with that is that in the end, they didn't come out of feudalism. They came out of Oriental despot, which was a form of feudalism which was mostly agrarian with different parts. That Oriental despot would usually lead to either feudalism or West capitalism, which was like a feudalist form of capitalism, which was made because of the way that Oriental despotism was supposed to go, which was into feudalism, agrarian feudalism, which is the way China went. But it's not like a straight line. It's not like you have to go there, but that's a basic method. So he misunderstood that and took it as Prussian capitalism growing and American capitalism being a requirement. Eventually, he corrupted that and turned it into, well, we could skip stages because of this whole thing and easily become Soviets instead. Skip the whole capitalism stage in general because we are already in capitalism, just the Prussian form of it. even though at the time they were in West capitalism, which was mostly completely different. It was capitalism with feudalist parts because of the Oriental history. What they would need, what the system was probably supposed to go for, was more of I wouldn't say like a feudalist system, but the West capitalism could evolve to be more like capitalism or something like that. I can't predict how West capitalism would have turned out if socialism wasn't involved, but it would have been very different. Because different systems take different paths, and you can see this with China. China was an Oriental despot place. That led to Oriental feudalism. Oriental feudalism being feudalism, but agrarian, mostly based upon agrarian with feudalist aspects. Oriental feudalism was the thing Mao grew up with. It was, the feudalism that came out of despot because of the different systems. It's just same. It's kind of like the same but different with West capitalism with the Russian because of the global capitalist system interfering with how these systems work in general, which made these systems more in line to turn more capitalist than anything else. Because if there was no global capitalist system, if majority of nations didn't turn to capitalism, then there would be different systems than a purely capitalist or feudalist one. You wouldn't have like Oriental feudalism or West capitalism. You would have a unique systems coming out of it. But because of the global order of capitalism, it changed basically. The systems were more in line to a deterministic route, even though at first it wasn't deterministic, but the globalization of it turned that into it. That's why Lenin was international at first. Well, he didn't claim that the USSR was socialist, really, so he was pretty much internationalist, but Stalin disregarded this. Mao is taking from Stalin, basically was like, well, you could do what Russia did, even though Russia failed, basically, and try to implement right-wing socialism, Marx, Lenin, into the Oriental feudalist time at the period, which caused, agreement with the bourgeoisie against the feudal lords, which caused capitalist communism, basically. Still capitalists, because of the thing, capitalist socialism, basically, it was, which eventually led to the state capitalism that we have today. It took a socialist form, but kept pushing for both socialism and capitalism at the same time, and putting capitalists in power who kept a sort of free market in place, which, I guess it's in line with the global order of capitalism, but it was a mistake. That's what led to Dengism and state capitalism. Dengists were basically the capitalist part of Maoists who overthrew it, who took it over. And that's what led to the revolution ultimately being betrayed in China, because they skipped stages. They got basically they skipped stages. I'm not saying that stages are necessary. You can skip stages, sure, but really you probably shouldn't, because you have to think of unique ways to get past certain issues, or just completely drop that, because if not, you're gonna have things that happen with Mao, where it was taken over by capitalists, or Lenin's right-wing thing, where in the end it was basically just a utopian project which would never lead to communism, because it pushes its own form of existence over everything else. It maintains stability over transcending into communism. It breaks the Hegelian solution that was introduced by Marx. Well, Marx didn't really say the actual solution itself, but he said, well, you just gotta use the Hegelian solution, transform it by a system that's based upon reforms with no commodities or whatever. But he didn't really outline it too well economically. But whatever. Maoism leading to state capitalist Dengism was the path that they created for themselves to the global order of capitalism. Utopian socialism isn't set to fail exactly by Marx's word. It just wouldn't lead to communism. That's what I mean by utopian socialism. It deviates from the liberating path. Non-utopian socialists' ideologies that deviate from the liberating path would be corporatists, who deviated into a more autocratic capitalist form, which isn't even that capitalist, if I'm honest. It's not, but it pushes capitalist control, so basically it is. And that could maintain itself, it could be stable for years, but it's not exactly on the liberating evolution of society. Or neoliberals right now, in this new system where basically they maintain control in all ways. It can work forever. It could be a stable system. We don't know. It doesn't look like one, but it could be, and he doesn't say that it has to fail. Communism isn't inevitable. It is not inevitable, and that's the problem with Bordiga. He kind of pushed this idea that it was inevitable and that praxis wasn't entirely necessary. He was utopian, basically, and that led to his ultimate demise because he didn't do anything, because he just saluted that it was necessary. He never really understood Marxist theory or how Lenin was kind of right about the global order of capitalism. So Bordiga was not Marxist enough. Bordiga did not understand Marx to the full potential, and neither did understand Lenin to the full potential either. Even though Lenin was wrong on some things, he was right about certain things too. And that certain thing that he was right about was the global order of capitalism and how it affects things. But Bordiga was also wrong about Marx and all this other stuff, which means that Bordiga is not completely left communism. I would say it's a moderate. Wilbur came back online. I didn't even know. Wilbur Sood is back on the internet. Yeah, communism isn't inevitable, and utopian socialism isn't set to fail via Marxist dialect. It's just set to take a different path than the original liberating path. It's just not working correctly. But if there's some sort of utopian socialist project which somehow manages to completely separate themselves from the global capitalist order and create a sort of reformist system that would turn the class into nothing and still somehow keep themselves away from the global order of capitalists, then I guess that could work as a skip or a solution to capitalism. Skip to communism. If they could find out how to cut themselves off from all of society and change from the global order to completely nationalize to a point. But I don't think that would ever work in praxis because of the global order of capitalism basically presupposing that you can't get away from it. But maybe. It's interesting. I mean, anarchism isn't very functional. I would say anarchism isn't very functional. It's failed multiple times. I referred it to anarcho-totalitarianism, like Chaz, Capitol Hill, referred it to anarcho-totalitarianism, where there was a totalitarian leader in Chaz, that one gang member, the gang leader, but in the end, he didn't put any laws and just allow the monopoly on violence that he had to basically be savage, chaotic. It technically limited, but not really limited, because he could do whatever he wants, and he controlled basically all the violence, but he allowed all the violence anyways. And he basically created a chaotic form of anarcho-totalitarianism. In a way, certain other projects are anarcho-totalitarianist, like Barack's communism, that is anarcho-totalitarianist in the way that the community, instead of one person, the community, the entire society, controls every aspect of your life. It is anarchy and totalitarian. These are not opposites. In that same way, it could be anarcho-fascism. All forms of anarcho-fascism is anarcho-totalitarian. I stand by that. But also in general, anarchy seems to be a failed experiment because it needs complete and utter voluntary aspects, and that means that really, since you can't just allow anyone to walk into the nation because there are people you cannot trust, and going off of mutual trust would require community, and if they have that aspect to leave, because people will want to leave eventually because they think, oh, how can my life get better than this? They will try to create solutions, so of course people would leave. So if you have a system where people can you can't get people in, but you can push people out. Therefore, that would be a dwindling, what's it called, population. And the population that's dwindling would not be a long-term solution. So really, I feel like any anarcho-communist project would kind of fail due to the voluntary aspect of it. I mean, really, they would have to, in some way, turn anarcho-totalitarian, or at least anarcho-statist to a form to keep people in or create some sort of equal system. But really, I don't think that would work. So that's really the only problem with anarchists in general as a solution. You can't just immediately jump into a form of communism in a specific place. And you could do it internationally, but I feel like that would fail because it no longer becomes voluntary. And that's the only thing that really keeps anarchists in a commune together, the voluntary aspect, which is also their whole undoing part. So a global anarchist project would probably fail to do the voluntary part, and people, not like some implicit greed or whatever, because honestly, an ego communist, you can see that greed, Emma Goldman, greed doesn't always mean that anarchist or communist projects wouldn't work. You can still base greed as a thing of mankind and still have peace or some sort of equality. Greed does not lead to capitalism. Greed does not lead to feudalism. It just leads to systems working how it does. And I don't really see any other sort of system put in place or like talked about. I really don't like Pol Pot, but that's it. I don't like him. He is also another form of anarcho-totalitarianism, but in a different way, because he's not even anarchist, but he takes from anarchist theory. He tried to implement anarcho-communism, but in a totalitarian form, where you take the immediate skip to communism, but through revisionism, the utopian of communism he would have under a totalitarian state, which kind of contradicts, since the state would be a thing of oppression to the class. That's what Marx and Engels said. He would be therefore basically oppressing utopia, oppressing a lack of class, which wouldn't make sense. So it's just, there's no actual system that's been put in place yet that would solve any sort of issue on the implementation of communism or skipping to the stage of communism. No one has said anything yet. That's why the transitional stage so far is the best solution to date. While silence. Okay.